The elevator doors opened on the 43rd floor, and nobody looked up. That was the thing about the Hargrove Tower lobby on a Tuesday morning. Everyone was moving with such focused, practiced urgency that a man stepping off the elevator in dark jeans, a grey Henley, and scuffed New Balance sneakers barely registered as a blip. The security guard at the front desk glanced up for half a second, then went back to his phone. The woman in the red blazer clutching a coffee and a leather portfolio didn't break stride. The two men in charcoal suits waiting by the window, deep in conversation about Q3 projections, never turned their heads at all. The man from the elevator walked slowly, the way someone walks when they have nowhere they need to rush to. He stopped near the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the Chicago skyline for a moment. Hands in his pockets, like he was just a tourist who'd wandered into the wrong building. His name was Nathan Cole, and he was 38 years old, and he owned this building, not in a figure-of-speech kind of way. Not, he practically owns it, or he acts like he owns the place. He actually owned it. The Hargrove Tower, all 47 floors of it, along with the Meridian Capital Group that occupied floors 38 through 46. The company he'd founded 11 years ago in a sublet office in Wicker Park with 2 engineers, a whiteboard and a business plan that 3 different venture capital firms had politely declined, before a 4th one finally said yes. Meridian Capital now managed $14.2 billion in assets. It had been featured in Forbes. It had been the subject of a Harvard Business School case study. It employed 340 people, most of whom were currently somewhere above Nathan Cole's head, starting their day without the faintest idea that the man who signed their paychecks was standing in the lobby staring out the window in sneakers. He liked it that way. Nathan Cole was not a man who wore his power like a second suit. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana, the son of a high school shop teacher and a hospital billing coordinator, and he had the kind of bone-deep practicality that expensive educations and accumulated wealth had never quite smoothed away. He drove a 4-year-old Subaru. He ate lunch at his desk most days, usually something from the deli cart on the corner. When people met him for the first time, at dinners, at conferences, at the occasional industry event he couldn't get out of, they almost always came away with the same impression. Quiet guy. Seemed sharp, seemed nice, but nothing you'd remember. He'd been told this, by people who meant it as a slight, and by people who genuinely didn't realize it was the most dangerous thing about him. This particular morning, Nathan hadn't planned to be in the lobby at all. He'd come down to meet an old friend, Desmond Park, his college roommate and Meridian's original chief technology officer, who was flying in from Seattle for a board presentation. Desmond's flight had landed early, and he'd texted to say he was 10 minutes out. So Nathan had ridden the elevator down and was now standing at the window, waiting, watching a line of yellow cabs crawl up Michigan Avenue. That was when he heard the voices. Not arguing, exactly. More like the specific, clipped tone of someone asserting authority over someone who hadn't asked for it. Nathan didn't turn around immediately. He'd learned, a long time ago, not to move toward noise before he understood what the noise was. Ma'am, I've already explained the policy. I understand your policy, but I'm telling you, there's a problem with the booking. The conference room was reserved for the full day by Vantage Consulting. That reservation was confirmed and paid. I don't have anything in the system showing a secondary booking. Nathan turned around. At the reception desk, a long, curved slab of white marble that sat across from the elevator bank. A woman was standing with a laptop bag over one shoulder and a rolling carry-on that suggested she'd come directly from the airport. She was somewhere in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back simply and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wore a navy pantsuit that had probably looked more pressed 12 hours ago, and she had the look of someone who had been traveling for a long time and had remained composed through all of it. The man behind the desk, Hargrove Towers building concierge, whose name badge read Philip, was not looking at her with hostility exactly. He was doing something more subtle than that. He was looking at her with patient, practiced dismissal. The kind of look that says, I have answered this already, and I will answer it again as many times as necessary, because I have nowhere to be, and your discomfort with that fact is not my concern. I'm not asking you to cancel their reservation, the woman said, and her voice was very even. I'm asking if there's another conference room available. Our client flew in from Boston. We've been planning this presentation for 3 months. Our other conference rooms are also fully booked today. You haven't looked. Ma'am, you haven't touched your keyboard since I walked up. You've been speaking from memory or assumption, and I'd appreciate it if you'd actually check. Philip's expression tightened. He looked at her for one more beat, long enough to make a point, and then, with visible reluctance, turned to his monitor. Nathan had been watching this exchange with the unhurried attention he gave to most things. He'd already formed several impressions. That the woman was telling the truth about her booking, that Philip had made up his mind about her before she'd finished her first sentence, and that whatever was happening had the particular texture of a problem that would take 2 more minutes to escalate and about 30 seconds to resolve if the right person stepped in. He walked over. Is there a problem? He asked. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't put any weight behind it. He asked it the way you'd ask someone if they needed help finding something on a grocery store shelf. Philip looked up. Sir, I'm handling it. I can see that. Nathan nodded. Then he looked at the woman. What happened? She studied him for a moment. People always did this. Tried to place him, tried to figure out what category he belonged to, and then gave up and answered the question because the question was reasonable. I'm Vivian Marsh, she said. I have a confirmed reservation for conference room B for today, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. I have the confirmation email and the invoice showing it was paid. I've been told the room is being given to someone else. Do you have the confirmation number? She had it ready. She'd clearly had it ready the entire time. Nathan looked at Philip. Can you pull that up? Philip's expression had shifted slightly. He still hadn't placed Nathan. That was clear. But something in the cadence of the interaction was making him recalculate. Nathan had a way of standing that didn't take up more space than necessary, but also didn't yield it. Philip typed. A silence. There is a reservation, Philip said, and the admission had a particular quality to it, like air leaving a tire. Under Marsh advisors, conference room Bagrat. Nathan said. So, where's the conflict? Another silence. Philip pulled up something else on his screen, clicked twice, scrolled. It looks like there was a data entry error when Vantage Consulting's reservation was processed. Their booking shows Room B, when it should have been Room C. Room C is available. Is that fixable this morning? I'd have to contact the Vantage event coordinator. How long does that take? Typically. 20 minutes, maybe. Okay. Nathan looked at Philip. Do that. And in the meantime, Miss Marsh should have access to the room she booked, because she booked it first, and she's paid for it, and her client is already on the way. He said this without any particular edge, the way you state a thing that is simply true. Philip looked at him for a moment. He was deciding something. And your name, sir? He asked, and there was a very specific quality to the question. It wasn't entirely polite. It was the question someone asks when they want to be able to say later, well, this person told me to do it, or alternatively, who do you think you are? Nathan Cole, Nathan said. Nothing. Philip didn't recognize the name. That happened. Not everyone read the business section. I'll need to confirm with building management before I am building management, Nathan said simply. A beat. Philip's eyes moved to Nathan's face, then down to the sneakers, back up. The recalibration was visible, and, to Nathan, not unkind. He'd watched people do it too many times to feel anything much about it. It was just the gap between what people expected and what was actually standing in front of them. "Mr. Cole," Philip said, and his entire register changed. "Of course. I'll get Marsh set up right away." Vivienne. Marsh, it turned out, did not need saving. This was the first thing Nathan understood clearly once the situation at the desk had been resolved and Philip was efficiently and somewhat chastenedly getting her room access and offering to have coffee sent up. Vivienne was polite about all of it, thanked him, answered the logistical questions, and handled the sudden reversal of Philip's demeanor with the gracious, slightly tired manner of someone who'd experienced reversals like this before, and had decided, somewhere along the way, not to make them into a bigger moment than they needed to be. But she hadn't walked away yet, and neither had Nathan. "Thank you," she said, and looked at him with the kind of directness that told him she was actually evaluating what had just happened, not performing gratitude. "You didn't have to do that." "It was your room," Nathan said. "I know that. You know that." Philip then needed a minute to catch up. She tilted her head slightly. "You own the building?" "I own the company that owns the building." "Ah." She seemed to find this interesting in a specific way. "Meridian Capital." He looked at her. "You know Meridian." "I know of Meridian," she said. "I do financial consulting, mostly for mid-market family businesses trying to figure out what to do with themselves. Whether to sell, whether to bring in outside capital, whether to go to the next generation. Your name has come up. In what context?" "In the context of someone who sees what a company actually is," she said, "rather than what the spreadsheet says it is." She said it without flattery, more like a doctor reading off a diagnosis. That's rarer than it sounds. Nathan found himself thinking that this was a more interesting conversation than most he had before 10 in the morning. "Are you based in Chicago?" he asked. "DC. I'm here for a client." She glanced toward the elevator. "A family business, 3rd generation. They're at a crossroads and they're scared, and they've been making decisions out of fear for about 4 years now, which is..." She stopped herself. "Sorry, you didn't ask for the case study." "I don't mind the case study," Nathan said. She looked at him again in that evaluating way. "How long have you been standing in your own lobby in sneakers?" "About 15 minutes. Do you do that often?" "When I'm waiting for someone. It's a good place to think." "Is it also?" she said, and there was something dry and precise in her voice now. "A good place to see how your building staff treats people when they think no one important is watching." Nathan paused. He hadn't thought of it that way. Exactly. He'd come down to meet Desmond, and he'd noticed what was happening at the desk because he was standing close enough to notice, and he'd intervened because it was solvable. But Vivienne Marsh had just handed him a more interesting frame for the last 20 minutes of his life, and he felt again that particular sense of someone who was worth paying attention to. "Sometimes," he said. She smiled. "I thought so." She picked up her carry-on handle. "Thank you again, Mr. Cole." "Nathan." "Nathan." She tilted her head toward the elevator. "Is there a good coffee place in the building? I've been traveling since 4 this morning and I'm running on fumes." "3rd floor," he said. "The espresso there is actually good. Not lobby coffee." Noted. She started to walk, then stopped. "My client. The family business. They're presenting to a potential strategic partner today. That's what the room is for." She paused. "If it goes badly and they end up needing a second opinion on their options, would you be averse to a conversation?" Nathan thought about this for approximately 2 seconds. "No," he said. "Good." She walked toward the elevator. "I'll be in room B until 2. Desmond Park arrived 8 minutes later, exactly as advertised, pulling a carry-on and looking like he'd slept on the plane and was pleased about it. He was 41, Korean-American, and had the specific energy of someone who was constitutionally incapable of moving at less than 3/4 speed. He and Nathan had met freshman year at Northwestern in a linear algebra class where Desmond had leaned over and quietly pointed out an error in the professor's proof. And Nathan had thought, "This is someone I need to know." They shook hands in the way old friends do when they haven't seen each other in 3 months, which was to say quickly and without ceremony. And then Desmond looked Nathan over. "You're wearing the sneakers again," he said. "I always wear the sneakers." "Elaine asked me to tell you she has a client who's a stylist." "Tell Elaine I appreciate it. I'll tell Elaine you said thanks and did nothing with it, which is what you always say." Desmond glanced at the desk, where Philip was on the phone looking focused and penitent. "What happened over there?" "Booking error," Nathan said. "It's handled." They rode up to 43. On the way, Desmond briefed Nathan on the presentation, a proposed infrastructure expansion into 3 new markets, the product of 8 months of analysis from the Seattle team. He talked quickly and cleanly, the way he always had, and Nathan listened in the way that had always served him best, without interrupting, without agreeing or disagreeing prematurely, just taking in the shape of the argument, before deciding what he thought of it. The morning passed. The presentation was good, rigorous where it needed to be, and honest about the uncertainties, which Nathan valued more than false confidence. They spent 2 hours going through it, and then another 40 minutes on the questions Nathan had, which were the kind of questions that looked simple on the surface and had complicated implications underneath. By noon, they'd reached a working consensus, which wasn't agreement on everything, but was clarity on what still needed to be resolved, and that was, in Nathan's view, a better outcome than false agreement. He had lunch at his desk, the deli cart sandwich. He thought about what Vivienne had said about the family business making decisions out of fear. At 12:45, his assistant, Priya, not from the excluded list, he caught himself. His assistant, whose name was Jess Abara, knocked and said there were a call from someone named Vivienne Marsh asking if he had 15 minutes. "Put it through," Nathan said. Vivienne's voice on the phone had the quality of someone who'd just finished a meeting and was thinking clearly about what the meeting had revealed. "The presentation went fine," she said. "The potential partner is interested, but the family patriarch, Walter, 74, founded the business 50 years ago. He's not ready to sign anything. He's not sure he trusts the partner's intentions. And honestly," she paused, "I think he's right not to. What does your gut say?" "My gut says the partner is interested in the brand name and the customer list and is going to spend 18 months talking about synergies and then restructure the operations team in a way that hollows out everything that made the company worth acquiring in the first place. That's a specific instinct. I've seen it 4 times. The language is always the same. Long-term commitment, family legacy, shared values. By the time they're using all 3 in the same sentence, you're already looking at a liquidation event dressed up as a partnership." Nathan was quiet for a moment. What does Walter want? Walter wants someone who actually understands what his company does and why it matters. He wants a buyer who'll leave the operating team in place and not reorganize everything because a consultant told them to. She paused. "He wants, if I'm being honest, someone like you, not you specifically, someone with the instincts you have." "How do you know what instincts I have?" "Because you own a $14 billion firm and you're wandering around your own lobby in sneakers on a Tuesday morning. And when a problem presented itself, at the front desk you walked over and fixed it without making it into a production. A beat. That's a specific kind of person." Nathan leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, the Chicago skyline held its usual composure, vast and indifferent and beautiful in the flat noon light. "Tell me about the company," he said. Vivienne told him. It was a regional logistics company, Castlewood Freight, founded in 1974 in Columbus, Ohio, now operating across 11 states, with a fleet of 340 trucks and a reputation, particularly in the Midwest agricultural sector, for reliability that their larger competitors charged a premium to match and still underdelivered. The third-generation family was split. Two of Walter's children wanted to sell. One wanted to find a strategic capital partner who'd let them expand without ceding control, and Walter himself was trying to hold all of it together while managing a recent health scare that he'd told no one about except his doctor and, apparently, Vivian. "He told you about the health scare?" Nathan said. "People tell me things," she said, and didn't elaborate. "And he's in Chicago today?" "He came with his daughter. Elsa, she's the one who wants to expand without selling. They're flying back to Columbus tonight. Could you get me a meeting this afternoon?" A silence on the line. Not a surprised silence, more like someone recalculating a timeline. "I can try," she said. "What time?" 3:30, Nathan said. "Conference room B. If you're done with it." Walter Castlewood was 74 years old and looked like a man who had spent 5 decades being underestimated by people in nicer suits than his and had found, over time, that this was more of an advantage than a problem. He was broad-shouldered and deliberate in his movements, with the careful economy of someone who'd learned that most things in life didn't require hurrying. He shook Nathan's hand with the kind of grip that wasn't trying to prove anything, which meant, in Nathan's experience, it didn't need to. His daughter Elsa was 41, sharp-eyed, and had done her homework. Nathan could tell because of the specific way she paused before her first question, the way people do when they've prepared several lines of inquiry and are deciding which one to lead with. "I looked you up," she said. "Most people do eventually," Nathan said. "You started Meridian in 2013 with $12 million in seed funding." 11.8, he said. The rounding annoyed me. A small smile. "You've made 4 acquisitions, all of them in industries where you had no prior background." 2 of them, Nathan said. "The other 2 I had background in." "Still, you don't stay in your lane." "I stay in my lane," Nathan said. "My lane is just wider than it looks from outside." Walter across the table made a sound that might have been a laugh. He'd been watching this back and forth with the quiet, accumulated patience of someone who'd sat in a lot of meetings and had developed the ability to learn more from watching than from participating. "What do you know about trucking?" he said. "Operationally." "Less than your most junior dispatcher," Nathan said. "Financially and structurally, and in terms of where your company sits in the logistics landscape and what it could become with the right capital partner." "Quite a bit." "Castlewood isn't a turnaround," Walter said. "It wasn't a question. I know that. I'm not interested in turnarounds. I'm interested in companies that are doing something right and need capital to do more of it, run by people who understand what they've built and want to protect it." He paused. "I don't do the thing where we come in, put our name on it, move the operations team to Phoenix, and replace your dispatchers with an algorithm." Walter looked at him. "Why should I believe that?" "Because I can give you 4 examples of acquisitions where I didn't do that, and you can call the owners and ask them yourself, and none of them will tell you what you're afraid of hearing." Nathan said it simply, without heat. "That's the best I can offer. I'm not going to sell you on something I haven't done yet." Something shifted in Walter's expression. Not trust, exactly, but the thing that comes before trust, which is the absence of active skepticism. Elsa leaned forward. "If we enter into a partnership, and I'm saying if, what does control look like?" "You keep it," Nathan said. "Operational decisions stay with your team. I bring capital, financial infrastructure, and access to markets you haven't been able to reach. I don't appoint people to your board without your agreement, and I don't restructure anything without a joint process." He looked at her. "The deal I'm describing is one where, 5 years from now, your company is larger and your family is still running it. If that's not what you want, then I'm not the right partner." Elsa was quiet for a moment. She was doing the math. Not just financial math, but the other kind, the kind where you calculate whether a person is telling you the truth. "Why do you want Castlewood?" she said. "You manage $14 billion. We're a mid-size freight company in Columbus." Nathan considered the question. Because you've built something that works, he said. Not on paper. Actually works. You have a retention rate on your driver team that's double the industry average. You have agricultural clients who've been with you for 30 years, who've been offered lower rates by your competitors and stayed anyway. Which means they're buying something from you that isn't just price. That's an asset that doesn't show up correctly on any balance sheet I've ever seen. And it's exactly the kind of thing that disappears if the wrong buyer comes in with a cost optimization mindset. He paused. I don't want to buy what you've built and then destroy the reason it worked. That's not an investment. That's vandalism. The word sat in the room. Walter looked at Nathan for a long moment. Then he looked at Vivienne, who was sitting at the end of the table with her hands folded and her expression carefully neutral. The expression of someone who has set a thing in motion and is now watching to see if it goes where she thought it would. You've been doing this for 11 years, Walter said. Yes, and you still dress like that. Nathan looked down at himself. The grey Henley, the dark jeans, the scuffed New Balance sneakers. Every day, he said. Walter made the sound again, and this time it was definitely a laugh. The meeting lasted 2.5 hours. When it was over, no papers were signed. That wasn't how these things worked, and Nathan would have been suspicious of anyone who tried to move that fast. What was signed informally was an agreement to continue. A 30-day exclusivity period during which Nathan's team would do their due diligence on Castlewood, and Castlewood's family would talk to the owners of Nathan's previous acquisitions, and at the end of which they'd reconvene and decide whether the partnership made sense. Elsa shook Nathan's hand with the specific grip of someone who has not yet decided, but has moved significantly closer to deciding. Walter's handshake was different. It was the handshake of someone who's spent 50 years reading people, and who has reached a preliminary conclusion. Vivienne said you were worth talking to, he said, and he was looking at Nathan in that direct, unhurried way. She was right. She usually is, I'm guessing, Nathan said. In 30 years, I haven't caught her being wrong yet. Walter picked up his jacket. I'll be in touch. They left. Nathan sat alone in conference room B for a few minutes after, in the room that almost hadn't been available, at the table where none of this was supposed to have happened. Through the window, the city was starting its late afternoon shift. The light going amber and horizontal and long. He thought about Walter, about the 50 years of work that had gone into building something that could be broken apart in 18 months by someone with an MBA and a cost efficiency mandate, about Elsa's eyes when he'd said the word vandalism. The quick recognition in them, the sense of someone hearing the thing they'd been trying to say for years but couldn't quite find the words for. He thought about Philip at the front desk and the way certainty can masquerade as information. He thought about standing in the lobby that morning in grey and denim, invisible, the way only certain kinds of wealth can afford to be invisible, watching a woman in a navy pantsuit be told her confirmed reservation didn't exist by a man who hadn't even looked at his keyboard. There was a knock at the conference room door. Vivienne opened it, carrying 2 cups from the 3rd-floor coffee place. She'd been right about the espresso. She was carrying it in a small paper cup with the particular reverence of someone who'd confirmed a theory. How do you think it went? She asked. Well, Nathan said, that's consistent with my read. She set one of the cups in front of him and sat down across the table. Walter called his son from the elevator. I could hear part of the conversation. What did he say? He said. She paused, choosing the words carefully. He said he'd found someone who spoke in a language he understood. Nathan picked up the coffee cup. Outside, a light somewhere across the skyline came on early, yellow against the blue of the late afternoon. How long have you been in this business? He asked. 31 years, she said. Since I was 27, and the firm I was at in Boston kept sending the senior partners to client meetings while I wrote their notes. She said it without bitterness. Eventually, I decided I'd rather be the person they wished they'd brought. What made you go out on your own? A meeting, actually, she said. Not unlike the one in your lobby this morning, though I was the one who needed the room. She looked at him with that evaluating directness. I had a confirmed booking, and a client flying in, and a man behind a desk who'd made up his mind about me before I said the second sentence. She paused, and no one stepped in. Nathan was quiet. So I handled it, she said, by myself, eventually, which took 45 minutes and 3 phone calls and the general manager of the hotel, and I sat down across from my client, having spent 45 minutes on something that should have taken 5, and I realized that if I was going to keep doing this work, I needed to be the kind of person who didn't need anyone to step in. She sipped her coffee. And then I worked on being that person for about 15 years. And now I can handle my own rooms, she said. And I can also recognize when someone steps in and does it cleanly and without making it into something it doesn't need to be. She looked at him. You didn't make it into a performance. It wasn't a performance. No, she said. That's what I mean. They sat with that for a moment. The city outside the window was fully gold now, the hour before blue that Chicago gets in October when the light comes in low and serious off the lake. I have a question, Nathan said. Go ahead. You told Walter about me before this afternoon. Vivienne tilted her head slightly, a half acknowledgement. You'd done research on Meridian, he said. You knew the number. You had a specific read on how I operate. That wasn't from this morning. She was quiet for a beat. Then, I've been watching Meridian for about 8 months, she said. Since I started working with the Castlewoods, I knew they were going to need to make a decision about their future, and I wanted to have a list of people whose instincts I could trust. A pause. You were on the list. How long was the list? You were the shortest path between Walter Castlewood's values and a successful outcome, she said, which was not exactly an answer to the question he'd asked, but was, he understood, the more important answer. Nathan looked at her. You set this up, he said. It wasn't an accusation. I put myself in a position where it might happen, she said. There's a difference. A small, precise smile. You had to actually be someone worth introducing. I can't manufacture that part. He thought about it. 8 months of watching, 30 years of work, a 4 a.m. flight and a rolling carry-on, and a navy pantsuit that had gotten wrinkled somewhere over Indiana. A problem at a front desk that could have been steered into a grievance, or an argument, or a long managerial call, and instead had resolved in under 4 minutes because the right person had happened to be standing close enough to notice, or had been put in a position to notice, or both. What do you think Walter will decide? Nathan asked. I think he'll say yes, Vivienne said. But I think it'll take him 3 weeks to get there, because Walter is the kind of man who needs to believe he arrived at a decision on his own, even when the path was laid out for him. Is that a problem? No, she said. That's wisdom. He's built a 50-year company on not moving until he understands what he's moving toward. She finished her coffee. You'd do well to remember that when he calls you. I will. She stood, gathered her bag, straightened the handle on her carry-on. At the door she paused. Nathan, she said. Vivienne, wear the sneakers when you meet with him in Columbus. A beat. He'll appreciate it more than you know. She left. Nathan sat alone for another minute in the amber light of the conference room, in the building he owned, thinking about a freight company in Columbus and a 74-year-old man who'd built something from nothing and was trying to figure out how to make sure it survived him. Thinking about Philip at the desk and the 45 minutes Vivienne had once spent getting a room that should have taken 5 minutes, and what it had cost her, and what it had made her. He thought about his father, the shop teacher in Gary, who used to say that the most dangerous people in any room were the ones who had nothing to prove, because they were the only ones actually paying attention. Nathan picked up the empty coffee cup, stood, tucked in the chair. He took the elevator back to 43. Nobody in the lobby looked up when he left either.